So, Jill, how can you help me? What happens on a 1 hour coaching call? The answer is different for every one of my clients. They range in age from 22 to 75. They range in experience from have never even opened a Google Ads account to working in Google Ads every day for the last decade. Some are business owners, some are marketers, some are freelancers, some are agencies, and some are none of the above. Let me give you 3 examples of 3 recent coaching calls I had that were really different. First is with a lawyer who recently started their own firm and wanted my help setting up their Google Ads. By the time I'm telling you this story, I've met with this lawyer 3 times, and this is what happened in our first meeting together. First, we created the Google Ads account. I guided them through the account creation process and showed them where to connect their Google business profile and Google Analytics to Google Ads. Next, we talked about campaign structure. We discussed their goals, and based on what they told me, I advised creating 2 separate search campaigns for 2 different kinds of legal services they were offering. And then, of course, we talked about budget. I walked them through the process of estimating the potential value of a lead using their conversion rate and average client value. We about calculated a budget from there and landed on $80 a day, which we're splitting across those 2 search campaigns. Then we went through that search campaign setup process together. We decided we were going to set up 1 search campaign on the call together, and then they would review the recording to be able to set up the second one on their own. Because after every single coaching call, I send my clients an email with a summary of recommendations and next steps, and then the full recording and auto-generated transcript from our call. I help them pick 5 to 8 relevant keywords using Keyword Planner in Google Ads as a starting point. And then I also explain the different match type options to them to understand how their ads could match with specific user searches. In this scenario, we decided to go with phrase match. Then I guided them through creating a responsive search ad with compelling ad headlines and descriptions, incorporating keywords and call to action phrases, and dynamic location insertion to personalize the ads. I gave them a little bit of homework with some thought starters and a template to help them write some of those other ads before creating the future ad groups. With conversion tracking, we didn't set it up on the call, but I stressed the importance of setting up conversion tracking before launching the campaigns. We did the part in Google Ads that we needed to do, and then they were able to send the tracking code to their website developer to get that implemented for them. Then before we finished, we did a recap of the other ad groups that needed to be created, plus the additional campaign they were going to create on their own using this recording as a guide. It's a lot to cover in 1 hour, but I always try to get to the point where they can hit publish campaign by the end of that first call, even if it means leaving a few follow-up items for them to complete on their old time, like finishing ad text or coming up with more keyword ideas. In this case, we were able to get all the keywords and ads wrapped up for 1 ad group, and they did the rest on their own. And then I reviewed that with them on a second follow-up call. Here's another example. A client came to me because they had recently bought a local services business. Their campaign started off doing really well in the spring, but then went off the rails in the summer, skyrocketing CPAs alongside plummeting conversion volume. We met in late July. And this is someone who actually had digital marketing experience and paid ads experience before buying this local business. So they were in a very different place than that lawyer I had met with on that other day. At first glance in the account, it wasn't immediately clear what was wrong, but there were a bunch of clues. And so since this was a fellow paid ads practitioner, on the call, I tried to walk them through my thought process and problem-solving process so they could gain those skills to use for the future, as well as solving the specific problem they were facing now. First, we noticed that the conversion rate had dropped, and none of the usual culprits for that. They hadn't made any changes that would suggest that that would happen. And next thing I noticed is that their CPCs, their cost per click, had increased by a lot. But again, no obvious culprit, changes in targeting, things like that. What pulled it all together for me was looking at search impression share. This is a metric that a lot of practitioners ignore, but I think it's one of the most important. I noticed that their search impression share had gone up a lot over this time period to like 50% impression share on non-brand searches. And there's no good or bad impression share, and more impression share is usually a good thing. But 50% impression share on non-brand is really high. And so my theory was maybe this is too high. Let's dive into that further. I was honest with the client and I told them I had some suggestions for things they could test, but we wouldn't know for sure until they tested it. So by the end of the call, here is what I recommended they test. I'll share that with you. And then they did tell me what happened after. I'll share that with you as well. So first, what I thought was happening was that demand for their service was really high in the spring. So there was a lot of search volume, a lot of conversions and customers to be had, and they had captured that opportunity well. Then, as late spring and early summer came around, demand started to decline. People weren't looking for this service as much anymore. They, didn't need it as much at that time of year. But this advertiser's budget stayed the same, and they were on a maximize bid strategy. So what that means is Google needed to drive CPCs up, needed to bid higher in order to try to stay competitive in a decreasing market. Basically, there were the same number of advertisers and the same amount of budget, but chasing fewer people. And so everybody had to compete harder to try to chase the fewer customers that existed. And when you use a maximize bid strategy, maximize conversions is great. It's often a starting point I recommend, but you're telling Google, spend my budget and try to get me as many conversions as possible. So it was spending the budget, trying to get as many conversions as possible, but conversion rate went down, cost per click went up, so it wasn't getting the same amount of conversions as before. This created a really vicious cycle of higher CPCs on lower quality traffic with less propensity to convert. The lack of conversions also meant that their smart bidding got stupid, and it started blowing the entire budget on 1 to 2 clicks a day because it just didn't know what it was doing anymore. The client actually was testing a bunch of different bid strategies every couple of days, changing the bid strategy, trying to get better results, but this constant change only confused the campaign further rather than helping. So my mentality is to always try to work with Google rather than against Google. And again, that's not how all practitioners work. Some try to, bring Google Ads back to where it was, be really manual, try to have as much control as possible. I think that's a losing battle. And I told my client that. So I advised them to try to do more in the account to help the automation work. And my main suggestion was to implement micro conversions. Basically, when someone clicked from the Google ad to their landing page, there was a lead form to fill out, and that was a conversion. But they weren't getting enough of those. You need at least one of those a day for smart bidding to work. And they were at a point now where they were getting maybe one a week. So I suggested they implement what we call micro conversions, tracking when people are engaging with the contact form, even if they don't finish filling it out. And by doing that, hopefully we can get at least one of those micro conversions every day, which will feed the smart bidding algorithm a lot more data. Because of course, someone can't complete a form unless they start the form. So if they at least start the form, we know we've reached the right kind of person, even if for whatever reason they don't complete the form and complete that full conversion. I also advised staying with maximize conversions for now. The goal is to get to target CPA because maximize conversion says, here's my budget, get me as many conversions as we can within it. Whereas target CPA is like, here's the efficiency I'm looking for, spend to get me that efficiency. It switches the focus. So I said, our goal is absolutely getting target CPA, but for now, make this micro conversion change. Let the maximize conversions, which is a smart bidding strategy, get those conversions, get smarter for you, and then move on over to target CPA once we know what the CPA should be based on those micro conversions. All right, here's the update I received from this client about 2 weeks later. This is a direct quote. Was seeing 1 to 2 micro conversions daily. Took your advice. I have too much market share. Lowered my budget to an amount per day. Removed micro conversion. I've now seen X CPA. And X CPA is an acceptable CPA for this client. So they added the micro conversions. We're getting 1 to 2 micro conversions a day. Train the smart bidding on that to get towards the right kind of searches and not bid towards the wrong kind of searches. Lowered the budget, removed the micro conversion, and then set their target CPA at the actual full conversion CPA, not just the micro conversion CPA. And it worked for them. I like this story because it's something we don't talk about often, how too high a budget can actually tank your results. A lot of people, especially Google reps, will tell you, just spend more money, just spend more money, spend more money. But in this case, they needed to spend less money to get better results. Don't you love how ambiguous this stuff is? Anyway, I'm glad it worked out for that client. Okay, the third story I'm going to tell you today was a coaching client who found me on LinkedIn. They had taken over management of a Google Ads account working in-house. So they work for this company. They're not like a freelancer or an agency. And the Google Ads account had been set up by an agency years ago and basically hadn't been touched since. So I looked in the account with them and I saw broad match modifier keywords, which were deprecated in 2021. Expanded text ads, there were no responsive search ads at all. Again, those were deprecated in like 2020 or 2021. And dozens of campaigns with only $10 to $20 a day each, which in my experience is just not an effective way to use your budget. Now, this structure back in 2020 worked really well, but over the years, performance has just steadily declined. Their ad spend has been flat. They've been spending the same amount month after month after month for years, but they're getting less and less and less conversions, to the point that now in 2024, they're getting about a third of the conversions they used to get, even though they're spending the same amount of money. Now, over the course of the call, I did not want to just say, oh, that's wrong and that's bad. Like, I wanted to make sure that I was using this as an education opportunity, because this client told me, they hadn't worked in Google Ads before, but they were responsible for managing this now and they needed to learn. So that was the real focus here. And they also told me that based on this session, they were going to see if they could get budget approval to work with me on an ongoing basis. So I wanted to make sure I delivered enough value that if I never met with them again, they would be in a much better place to manage this by themselves. But of course, I also wanted to give a sneak peek of what it would look like to work together on an ongoing basis. So for example, I showed them what the broad match modifier keywords were, that we don't use those anymore. I explained how the different match types work, the importance of reviewing the search terms report, not just the keyword report, and that was a great takeaway for them. When we looked at the ads and saw that they were all expanded text ads, I explained how ads are now responsive and what that means, and how to start thinking about giving Google Ads the right building blocks for your creative. We then looked at search impression share, and that let us discuss the relationship between budgets and bids, and led to a conversation about what a new consolidated campaign structure could look like. By the end of the call, I recommended a clean slate rather than trying to work within the existing structure. And I outlined a 4-point plan for this client, which they could either work through with me on future calls or on their own. Step 1, analyze. Review all the performance data to identify what's still driving results, and then use planning tools like Keyword Planner to find new opportunities. That's step 1. Step 2, after we've analyzed, is to take that insight and strategize. In a spreadsheet, plan your new account structure. Have a tab for campaigns, a tab for ad groups, a tab for keywords, and a tab for ads. Then step 3 is to implement. Now that you've planned it all out, launch it in the Google Ads interface. And step 4 is optimize. And that's actually where most of the work happens. Repeating the cycle again by analyzing your results, strategizing adjustments, and implementing changes. Giving it a bit of time. Analyzing results, strategizing adjustments, implementing changes. Making optimizations as needed, of course, but also leaving it alone as needed. And spoiler alert, this client did get budget approval to work together. They purchased 5 sessions with me, and we've used 3 of them so far. We've launched the new structure, and I'll report back on how that goes for them. If you have any more questions about what it's like to work with me or what a coaching call entails, feel free to drop a comment on this video.